Before the story begins, a gentle reminder for you. If you enjoy powerful love stories filled with mystery, loyalty, and unforgettable moments, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. New York City never slept, but that night, it held its breath. The restaurant was one of those places where money spoke before people did. Crystal chandeliers glowed softly over marble floors, and quiet piano music floated through the air. The kind of restaurant where conversations stayed low, where waiters moved like shadows, and where no one ever raised their voice, especially not without consequences. She sat near the window. Her name was Elena Moretti, and she didn't try to stand out. That was the most dangerous thing about her. Simple black dress, hair tied neatly behind her neck. Calm posture. Anyone passing by would think she was just another elegant woman enjoying dinner in Manhattan. They would be wrong. Across the room, men in tailored suits pretended not to watch her. They weren't bodyguards, not officially. But they were there because of one man. Luca De Santis. The name alone carried weight. In certain circles, it was spoken carefully, if at all. Luca wasn't loud. He wasn't flashy. He didn't need to be. He was the kind of mafia boss who ruled without raising his voice, who ended wars with meetings instead of bullets, and who inspired loyalty deeper than fear. And Elena was sitting alone, because Luca trusted no one more than her. She lifted her glass of water and took a slow sip, eyes drifting toward the city lights outside. The calm on her face wasn't fake. She had learned how to live in this world, how to breathe inside danger without flinching. Then it happened. A man from another table stood up. He was drunk enough to forget where he was, rich enough to believe rules didn't apply to him. His tie was loose, his smile careless, his confidence borrowed from alcohol and ego. He walked toward Elena. One of Luca's men noticed immediately. Another reached for his phone. But Luca, sitting quietly at the back of the restaurant, raised just one finger. Not yet. The man leaned closer to Elena's table, grinning like he owned the room. Well now, he said loudly enough for others to hear, what's a beautiful woman like you doing all alone, baby? The word hung in the air. Baby. The piano player missed a note. Elena's fingers tightened slightly around her glass, but she didn't look afraid. She didn't smile either. Slowly, she lifted her eyes and met the man's gaze. I suggest you walk away, she said calmly. The man laughed. Oh come on, he replied, placing a hand on the back of her chair. Don't be like that. I'm just being friendly. That's when the room changed. Not because of shouting. Not because of violence. But because Luca De Santis stood up. He didn't rush. He didn't look angry. He adjusted his jacket, buttoned it once, and began walking toward them with measured steps. Each step was quiet, controlled, and final. People noticed. Conversations stopped. Forks paused midair. Even the waiters froze. Everyone in that room knew something was about to happen, though most of them didn't yet understand why. Luca stopped just behind the man. He didn't touch him. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't even look threatening. He simply leaned forward slightly and spoke one sentence. That word you used, Luca said softly, belongs to my wife. Silence. The drunk man's face drained of color. Slowly, very slowly, he turned his head. And when he saw Luca De Santis standing inches away, his confidence collapsed. I didn't know, he stammered. I swear, I meant no disrespect. Luca finally met his eyes. You didn't know, Luca repeated calmly. That's why you're still standing. The man nodded rapidly, backing away like a child caught stealing. I'm sorry, truly. It won't happen again. It won't, Luca said. The man didn't argue. He turned and walked straight out of the restaurant, leaving his table, his drink, and his dignity behind. Only then did the room breathe again. Luca turned toward Elena. Are you all right? He asked, his voice softer now, different. She nodded. I told him to leave. A faint smile touched Luca's lips. I know. He pulled out the chair across from her and sat down, ignoring the stares around them. To the world, he was a legend, a danger, a king of shadows. But to Elena, he was something else entirely. You shouldn't have come alone, he said. She raised an eyebrow. You taught me not to hide. He chuckled quietly. I taught you how to survive. Their eyes met, and in that moment, everything else faded, the city, the restaurant, the whispers. There was history between them. Not just love, but battles fought side by side, secrets buried deep, and choices that could never be undone. Elena leaned slightly forward. You didn't have to step in. Luca's expression hardened just a little. Anyone who forgets who you are, needs reminding. She smiled then. A real one. But neither of them noticed the man sitting near the bar, watching silently, making a call under the table. Because in this world, every sentence had consequences. And that one sentence Luca spoke was about to start a war. The restaurant slowly returned to life, but something invisible had shifted in the air. People resumed eating, yet their movements were careful now, restrained. Everyone had witnessed the moment. Everyone would talk about it later. In New York's shadowed circles, stories traveled fast, and Luca De Santis's single sentence would echo far beyond those marble walls. Luca and Elena sat across from each other in silence for a moment. Not an awkward silence, one filled with understanding. He studied her face carefully, the same way he always did after danger brushed too close. Elena noticed, of course. She always did. You're thinking too loudly, she said softly. Luca exhaled and leaned back. That man wasn't important, he replied. But the ones watching him might be. Elena glanced toward the bar without turning her head too much. She had already noticed the reflection in the mirror behind the bottles. A man in a gray coat. Calm posture. Phone hidden in his palm. Watching, not drinking. I saw him, she said. He wasn't here for dinner. Luca's jaw tightened slightly. This city has too many ears. They finished their meal without another incident, but Luca made a decision before dessert arrived. When he stood, his men appeared instantly, as if summoned by instinct. One opened the door. Another scanned the street outside. The city greeted them with cold night air and distant sirens. The black car waited. Inside, silence returned, broken only by the hum of the engine. Elena stared out the window as lights streaked past, her reflection overlapping with the city she had learned to survive in. Luca watched her, knowing better than to interrupt her thoughts. You knew this would happen eventually, he said quietly. Yes, she replied. But not tonight. Luca nodded. They test boundaries. That sentence I spoke tonight, some will see it as a warning. Others as an invitation. Elena finally looked at him. And which one worries you? The ones who don't fear warnings. The car pulled into the De Santis estate, hidden behind iron gates, surrounded by stone walls older than most of the city's buildings. Security lights glowed softly, illuminating a place that looked peaceful from the outside but existed because peace had to be defended. Inside, Elena removed her coat and placed it neatly on the chair. This house wasn't just Luca's fortress, it was hers too. Every hallway held memories. Some warm, some soaked in blood and sacrifice. She poured herself tea while Luca loosened his tie. You should rest, he said. Tomorrow will be heavy. Elena smiled faintly. You say that every time trouble comes. And I'm usually right. Before she could respond, one of Luca's men entered quietly. His name was Marco, trusted, sharp-eyed, loyal. Boss, Marco said, lowering his voice. We traced the call from the restaurant. Luca's expression hardened instantly. And it went to a burner linked to the Russo family. Elena closed her eyes for a brief moment. The Russos. An old name. An old problem. They've been quiet for months, Luca said slowly. Marco nodded. Which makes this louder than it looks. Luca dismissed him with a nod. When the door closed, the room felt heavier. Elena took a slow breath. So it begins, she said. Luca stepped closer to her. It began years ago. Tonight just reminded them you're still untouchable. Elena met his gaze. That's what scares them. She wasn't wrong. Elena wasn't just Luca's wife. She was his strategist, his quiet force. She understood people, patterns, weaknesses. Many of Luca's enemies believed she was his weakness. They never realized she was his sharpest edge. That night, Elena didn't sleep. She stood by the window long after the lights dimmed, watching the dark trees sway in the wind. Memories surfaced, of how she met Luca, of the life she chose, of the promise they made to protect each other without hesitation. Meanwhile, across the city, the man from the restaurant sat in a dim room, hands shaking as he replayed Luca's words in his head. He hadn't known, but the Russos did, and they were smiling now. He claimed her, one of them said. Publicly. Another laughed softly. Good. That means she's still valuable. Plans were already being whispered. Not reckless ones. Careful ones. Because Luca De Santis didn't forgive easily, and he never forgot. Back at the estate, Luca finally joined Elena by the window. He placed a hand on her shoulder. Whatever they're planning, he said, we face it together. Elena leaned into him slightly. They think calling me, baby, was the insult, she said. They don't understand the real mistake. Luca smiled coldly. They reminded the city who you belong to. And who I stand beside, she added. Outside, thunder rolled faintly in the distance. A storm was coming. And this time, it wasn't just about respect. It was about power, loyalty, and a woman the underworld should never have underestimated. Agar ap chat hain k main part 3, 1000 words, Likun, Jahan Russo family ka move, danger Elena k Karib, our Luca ka ruthless decision I, Tabalakain. Morning arrived quietly at the De Santis estate, but calm never meant safety. The sun rose over stone walls and iron gates, painting the grounds in soft gold, while inside, Luca De Santis was already awake. He stood in his private office, looking over the city from a distance, his expression unreadable. The events of the previous night replayed in his mind, not as emotion, but as calculation. In his world, every public moment carried a hidden message, and the Russos had clearly received his. Elena entered the room without knocking. She never needed to. She carried a tablet in her hand, her eyes sharp, focused. 3 unusual movements overnight, she said calmly. 1 warehouse lease transferred, 2 shell accounts activated, and a meeting request sent through a third party. Luca turned slowly. They're setting a stage. Yes, Elena replied. And they want us to see it. Luca walked back to his desk and sat down, folding his hands. They want to remind the city they still exist. But they're using the wrong symbol. Elena nodded. They're using me. She didn't sound offended. She sounded analytical. That's what made her dangerous. Across the city, the Russo family gathered in an abandoned theater they now used for private meetings. The seats were dusty, the stage lights dim, but the power in the room was very real. Victor Russo sat in the center, his fingers tapping slowly against the armrest. He was older than Luca, but hunger still burned in his eyes. De Santis spoke 1 sentence, Victor said. And the city froze. One of his men leaned forward. That's why we move carefully. Not against him directly. Victor smiled thinly. No, we move toward what he protects. Back at the estate, Luca's men assembled in the briefing room. Marco stood near the screen, showing maps and timelines. Luca watched without interrupting. Elena stood beside him, arms crossed, absorbing every detail. They've increased surveillance near Elena's usual routes, Marco reported. No direct threats yet. Luca's voice was cold. That means they're waiting for a reaction. Elena spoke before Luca could continue. We don't change our routine. Marco looked surprised. With respect. That's exactly why, Elena said. Fear invites mistakes. We don't give them that. Luca studied her for a long moment, then nodded. She's right. Later that afternoon, Elena left the estate in the same car, at the same time, with the same driver. To the outside world, nothing had changed. But unseen eyes followed her every move. Cameras tracked reflections. Messages were passed silently. At a red light, Elena noticed a motorcycle slow beside the car. The rider glanced at her helmet visor dark. For a brief second, their eyes met through glass and shadow. Then the light changed, and the bike disappeared into traffic. Elena didn't react. That was the message. When she returned home, Luca was waiting. He didn't ask if she noticed. He already knew. They're getting closer, he said. They want to see if you'll pull me back, she replied. And I won't, Luca said firmly. Because that's what they expect. That night, an invitation arrived. No threats. No signatures. Just a location and a time. Neutral ground. Elena read it twice. They want to talk. They want to test, Luca corrected. Talking is just the excuse. Against Marco's objections, Luca agreed to attend, but alone. Elena watched him prepare, adjusting his cufflinks with precision. You know it's a trap, she said. Yes, Luca replied. And they know I know. The meeting took place in an old waterfront building. Victor Russo waited inside, smiling as Luca entered. You made quite a statement last night, Victor said. Luca sat without greeting him. I corrected a mistake. Victor's smile faded. You've grown attached. Luca leaned forward slightly. Careful. Victor laughed softly. That's the problem, Luca. The city sees her now. They see what matters to you. Luca's eyes darkened. And what you see is your end if you forget your place. The meeting ended without agreement. Without threats. Without peace. When Luca returned home, Elena was waiting in the courtyard. She looked at his face and understood immediately. They won't stop, she said. No, Luca replied. They've already crossed the line. In another part of the city, a Russo soldier received a quiet order. No violence. No witnesses. Just pressure. Subtle. Psychological. Because the Russos weren't trying to kill Elena. They were trying to make Luca choose. As night fell, Elena stood on the balcony, feeling the weight of being watched. Luca joined her, placing a hand over hers. They think calling you, baby, was disrespect, Elena said quietly. They don't understand what they really did. Luca's voice was steady. They reminded the city that touching what's mine has consequences. Below them, the city pulsed with life, unaware that a silent war had already begun. And in that war, love wasn't weakness. It was the battlefield. The first real move came quietly, the way dangerous things always did. It wasn't an attack, not in the way most people understood violence. No guns, no screams, no blood in the streets. Instead, it came disguised as coincidence, wrapped in normality, hidden beneath routine. And that was what made it terrifying. Elena noticed it before anyone else. She was leaving a charity board meeting downtown, one she had attended dozens of times before. Same building, same parking structure, same security pattern. As she walked toward the car, she felt it, that subtle shift in the air, the instinct she had trained for years to trust. Her driver opened the door as usual, but Elena paused. Wait, she said calmly. The driver froze. Ma'am, there's a delay, she replied. 2 seconds too long. Before he could ask what she meant, a car at the far end of the garage suddenly accelerated, engine roaring loudly, then swerved away at the last moment. No crash. No contact. Just chaos. People shouted. A guard ran forward. The moment passed. To anyone else, it looked like reckless driving. To Elena, it was a message. She sat in the car, hands folded, expression unchanged. They wanted to see if I'd panic. Back at the estate, Luca received the report before Elena even arrived home. He listened without interruption, his face growing darker with every word. When Elena entered his office, he didn't stand. He didn't speak. He simply looked at her, eyes sharp with restrained fury. They're escalating, she said. Luca finally spoke. They're measuring distance. From me, Elena added. From us, Luca corrected. Marco entered, tension clear in his voice. Boss, we intercepted chatter. The Russos aren't acting alone. Luca's gaze snapped to him. Who? Marco hesitated. Someone inside the city's neutral network. Access they shouldn't have. A traitor. The word didn't need to be spoken. It hung between them, heavy and dangerous. Elena exhaled slowly. That explains the timing, she said. They know routes. Schedules. Luca stood abruptly, the chair sliding back. Lock the house down. Quietly. I want a list of everyone who's been near Elena's operations in the last 6 months. Marco nodded and left immediately. Elena watched Luca closely. She had seen him angry before. She had seen him ruthless. But this was different. This was controlled violence, the kind that didn't explode but calculated. You're blaming yourself, she said. Luca didn't deny it. I made you visible. Elena stepped closer. I chose visibility long before tonight. Luca's jaw tightened. They're trying to make me react emotionally. And are you? She asked softly. He met her eyes. No, I'm reacting strategically. That night, Luca made his move. Not against the Russos directly, but against their confidence. One by one, their business channels began to stall. Shipments delayed. Accounts frozen. Partners suddenly unreachable. No signatures. No fingerprints. Just pressure closing in like a tightening fist. Across town, Victor Russo slammed his hand on the table. He's squeezing without firing a shot. One of his men spoke nervously. He's warning us. Victor shook his head. No, he's reminding us who controls the board. But Victor wasn't done. He needed leverage. Something Luca couldn't ignore. That leverage came in the form of a name. The next morning, Elena received a call from an unfamiliar number. She almost didn't answer. Almost. Mrs. De Santis, a man's voice said politely. We should talk. Elena's expression remained calm. You shouldn't have this number. A pause. Then a smile in his voice. That's why I called. She ended the call without another word. Minutes later, Luca burst into the room. Who called you? She told him. The room went silent. That name, Luca said slowly, was buried years ago. Elena nodded. They dug it up. The Russos hadn't threatened her life. They'd threatened her past. Something Elena had protected fiercely. Something even Luca didn't fully control. And now it was being dragged into the open, piece by piece. They want to destabilize you, Luca said. Through me. They want to remind you I'm human, Elena replied. Not a symbol. Luca took her hands firmly. You are not their leverage. But Elena could see it now, the truth neither of them wanted to say out loud. This wasn't just about respect anymore. Or territory. Or power. It was about exposure. That night, a file appeared on Luca's desk. No sender. No warning. Inside were photos. Old ones. Elena younger. Vulnerable. Moments she had fought to leave behind. Luca stared at them, rage simmering beneath his calm exterior. Not at Elena, but at the audacity. They crossed the line, he said quietly. Elena stood beside him. Now they learn what happens after. Outside, the city glowed unaware, traffic flowing, lives continuing. But beneath the surface, alliances were shifting, masks were slipping, and a silent countdown had begun. The Russos thought they were clever. They thought they were patient. They didn't realize that Luca De Santis had stopped negotiating the moment Elena became a target. And when a man like Luca stopped talking, the city listened.
The file stayed on Luca's desk long after the lights in the estate dimmed. He didn't close it. He didn't destroy it. He stared at it, absorbing every image, every reminder of a life Elena had survived before she ever stood beside him. What angered him wasn't what the Russos knew, it was that they believed knowledge gave them control. Elena watched him quietly. You're thinking about retaliation, she said. Luca finally looked at her. I'm thinking about containment. She nodded. Then you already understand. They're not trying to hurt me. They're trying to rewrite me. That was the danger. Elena's past wasn't weakness, it was transformation. But in the wrong hands, even truth could be sharpened into a blade. Marco entered with tension etched into his face. Boss, we found the leak. Luca's eyes narrowed. Who? Marco hesitated for a fraction of a second. Anthony Bellini. The name hit the room like a gunshot. Anthony had been with Luca for years. Not family, but trusted. Strategic. Present at meetings, routes, schedules. Close enough to know details. Close enough to betray without suspicion. Elena's operations? Luca asked. Anthony had access, Marco replied. Indirect, but consistent. Elena exhaled slowly. That's why they knew timing. Luca stood, the calm on his face now terrifying in its precision. Bring him in. Quietly. Anthony didn't resist when he arrived. He walked into the room with a forced smile, hands open, as if honesty could still save him. Luca didn't sit. He didn't raise his voice. Tell me why, Luca said. Anthony swallowed. It wasn't personal. The Russos promised protection. I thought. You thought, Luca interrupted, that I wouldn't notice. Anthony's eyes flicked toward Elena. I never meant for her to be involved. Elena stepped forward. You made her the target. The room fell silent. Luca nodded once to Marco. Anthony was escorted away, his fate sealed not by anger but by certainty. Luca didn't watch him leave. He was useful, Marco said carefully. Not anymore, Luca replied. That night, Luca made the call he had avoided for years. Old alliances stirred. Names long silent answered. The city's balance shifted quietly, like tectonic plates beneath concrete. Meanwhile, the Russos moved forward with their plan. A story surfaced online, carefully crafted, half-truths mixed with speculation. Elena's past framed not as survival, but scandal. It spread fast, not loudly, but efficiently. Enough to be noticed. Enough to be whispered. Elena saw it before Luca did. They're testing public reaction, she said. Luca read the article, his expression unreadable. They think exposure forces retreat. They don't know me, Elena replied. But Luca did know the danger. Not to reputation, but to control. Once the public narrative shifted, enemies multiplied. Opportunists emerged. They want me distracted, Luca said. Defensive. Elena shook her head. They want you reckless. That's when Elena made her decision. I'm attending the charity gala tomorrow, she said. Luca turned sharply. No. Yes, she replied calmly. They expect you to hide me. We don't. It's too visible, Luca argued. That's exactly why, Elena said. Let them see I'm not afraid. Let them see you're not reacting. Luca studied her face. He saw no fear, only resolve. Then we control the room, he said finally. The gala was everything the Russos hoped it would be. Media, donors, cameras, influence. Elena arrived on Luca's arm, elegant and composed. Every eye followed her. Every whisper froze when Luca entered beside her. They didn't speak much. They didn't need to. Across the room, Victor Russo watched, displeased. She's stronger than they said, he muttered. A man leaned toward him. But pressure works. Victor's smile returned. It always does. Midway through the evening, Elena felt it, the shift. A familiar presence. Someone from her past, carefully placed among the guests. Her heartbeat remained steady, but her grip on Luca tightened slightly. He noticed. They brought ghosts, she whispered. Luca's jaw hardened. Then we end the haunting. The man approached. Polite. Public. Untouchable in that moment. He smiled at Elena like history belonged to him. Elena, he said softly. It's been a long time. She met his gaze without flinching. Not long enough to miss you. Luca stepped forward. You're out of place. The man smiled thinly. Am I? Or did the past finally catch up? Elena spoke before Luca could respond. You were paid to appear. That's all you are now. The man hesitated. Just enough. Security intervened moments later, removing him without spectacle. The room buzzed. Victor Russo turned away, irritation flashing across his face. Back home, Luca poured 2 glasses of whiskey. They underestimated you. Elena accepted the glass. They always do. But Luca knew the truth now. The Russos weren't backing down. They were escalating emotionally because they were losing strategically. They've run out of clean moves, Luca said. That makes them dangerous. Elena looked at him steadily. Then we finish this. Luca raised his glass slightly. Tomorrow. Outside, sirens echoed faintly. Somewhere in the city, a Russo operation collapsed quietly, unnoticed by the public. The countdown had begun. And this time, Luca wasn't just protecting territory. He was ending a threat. The city felt different the night Luca De Santis decided to end it. Not louder. Not quieter. Just heavier, like New York itself sensed that something permanent was about to happen. Luca stood in the Situation Room beneath the estate, screens glowing softly around him, maps layered with information only a few men in the city could understand. Elena stood beside him, not behind him, exactly where she belonged. This is their last move, Marco said, pointing at the screen. Russo assets are exposed on 3 fronts. If we close them tonight, they don't recover. Luca nodded once. No chaos. No civilians. This ends clean. Elena studied the data, her mind moving faster than the screens. Victor won't run, she said. He'll want the final word. And he'll get it, Luca replied. On our terms. Across the river, Victor Russo prepared for war the only way he knew how, by refusing to believe he had already lost. His men were nervous. Calls weren't being answered. Money wasn't moving. Allies were suddenly unreachable. But pride is louder than reason when power slips through your fingers. They think'll beg, Victor snarled. I built this city with fear. Fear, however, had changed ownership. The first collapse happened quietly. A shipping company tied to the Russos lost its license within minutes of a sealed court order going live. Then a bank froze multiple accounts under investigation. Then a political contact stopped returning calls. One domino fell, then another, and another, all without a single shot fired. Elena watched the confirmations come in. They're isolating, she said. Luca's voice was calm. That's what animals do before they strike or surrender. They won't surrender, Elena replied. No, Luca agreed. They'll lash out. As if summoned by the words, Marco's phone vibrated. He listened, then looked up. Russo convoy moving. Destination unclear. Luca didn't hesitate. They're heading to the docks. Elena turned to him. He wants a public ending. He wants witnesses, Luca said. We won't give him any. Within minutes, the operation shifted. Cars moved without sirens. Orders were whispered, not shouted. Luca and Elena left together, their vehicle disappearing into the city like another shadow among many. The docks were quiet, fog rolling in from the river, lights reflecting off dark water. Victor Russo stood near the edge, coat pulled tight, watching his men spread out nervously. He sensed it now, the absence of power, the silence where fear used to live. Then Luca stepped forward. No ambush. No drama. Just presence. Victor turned, surprise flickering across his face before hardening into anger. You came yourself. Luca stopped a few feet away. So did you. Victor laughed bitterly. All this over a word. Elena stepped into view beside Luca. No, she said calmly. Over the mistake of thinking I was yours to use. Victor's eyes narrowed. You hit her well, he said to Luca. But the city sees now. Luca's voice was cold. The city has always known. Victor glanced around, finally realizing how alone he was. His men shifted uneasily. Some stepped back. You're finished, Luca said quietly. This ends tonight. Victor straightened. Then do it. Be what they fear. Luca shook his head once. Fear is temporary. Control is permanent. With a subtle nod, Luca signaled. Authorities moved in. Not corrupt ones, not bought ones, but legitimate forces acting on evidence collected patiently over years. Charges, warrants, names. Everything Victor believed he had buried surfaced at once. Victor's face collapsed as cuffs closed around his wrists. This isn't over, he spat. Elena met his gaze steadily. It is for you. As Victor was taken away, the docks fell silent again. No cheers. No celebration. Just the sound of water and the weight of an era ending. Back at the estate, dawn crept in slowly. The war that never officially existed was over. Marco entered the room, relief evident. Russo operations are shut down citywide. Luca nodded. Good. Elena poured coffee, hands steady despite the night behind them. They'll talk about this for years, she said. They'll talk quietly, Luca replied. That's how power survives. Elena looked at him then, really looked at him. You could have destroyed them publicly. Yes, Luca said, but that would have made us the story. She smiled faintly. Instead, you made them disappear. Luca met her smile. You taught me that. For the first time in days, silence felt peaceful. But Luca knew one thing remained. The city might forget the Russos, but it would remember the moment in that restaurant, the sentence that started it all. He reached for Elena's hand. One word, he said softly. And they underestimated everything. Elena squeezed his hand. They forgot who was listening. Outside, New York woke up, unaware that its balance had shifted once more, guided not by violence but by precision. The war was over. Only the legacy remained. Morning sunlight spilled across the De Santis estate, painting marble floors and polished wood in soft gold, as if the city itself was granting them a rare moment of calm. Luca and Elena stood on the balcony, looking out over Manhattan, the skyline hazy in the early light. For the first time in days, the silence wasn't filled with tension or calculation, it was filled with a fragile peace, one hard-earned through strategy, loyalty, and an unspoken understanding that they had survived together. The Russos were gone. The betrayals had been punished. The threats had been neutralized. And yet, the weight of the past lingered, like a shadow that refused to disappear. Elena sipped her coffee, eyes on the city below. It's quiet, she said softly. Almost unreal. Luca didn't answer immediately. He rarely did when he was thinking, and right now, he was reflecting on everything that had led to this moment. The restaurant, the word, the challenge, the threats that tried to reach her through the city and through men who had once been trusted. All of it had culminated here, not in fireworks or dramatic violence, but in control. He finally spoke. Quiet is earned. And tonight, it was earned by you. Elena turned to him, raising an eyebrow. By me. Yes, Luca said, his voice steady but warm. You weren't just the reason they acted. You were the reason we survived it. Calm under pressure, focused when fear tried to creep in. You didn't just stand by me, you guided me. Her lips curved into a small, almost shy smile. You always make me sound heroic. Because you are, Luca said, stepping closer. The city's first light glinted off his cufflinks, the same ones he had worn when he silenced a man in that restaurant months ago. And you always have been. They didn't need to speak after that. Words were unnecessary between them now. They had survived betrayal, danger, and the weight of the underworld, and somehow, the world still seemed to move forward beneath them. Elena leaned against him slightly, letting herself feel the security that only his presence could provide. Not the danger, not the authority, not even the legend, just him. The man who had called her baby in public and then silenced a world with a single sentence. That man had been their shield and their sword. And now, quietly, he was also her safe place. Do you ever think about that night? Elena asked after a moment, her voice soft. The restaurant. The word. Luca's jaw tightened briefly, though his expression remained calm. I think about it every day, he admitted. Not because of the man. Not because of the insult. But because of what it taught me, what it reminded me of. Who you are. Who we are together. Elena turned fully to face him. And what did it remind you? That some things can't be challenged, he said, looking into her eyes. Some lines, once drawn, are permanent. And some people, no matter who stands in the way, will always be untouchable. You are one of those people. A breeze whispered through the balcony, carrying with it the distant sounds of a city that would never fully sleep. Elena rested her head lightly on his shoulder, allowing herself a rare moment of vulnerability. I never wanted to be untouchable, she said. I just wanted to survive. And with you, I realized I could do more than that. Luca wrapped his arm around her, holding her closer, feeling the calm pulse of her heart against his chest. You do more than survive, he said. You command respect. You inspire loyalty. You change the rules just by being yourself. She laughed softly, a sound that had been rare these past weeks. I don't feel like a rule changer, she said. You do, Luca replied. And everyone who tried to use you, threaten you, or underestimate you, they learned that the hard way. They still don't know how lucky they were to walk away at all. Elena's hand found his, fingers intertwining. And you, were you lucky? Luca smiled faintly, the kind of smile that carried weight and warmth at the same time. Luck had nothing to do with it. Focus, loyalty, and knowing exactly who I'm protecting, that's how we survived. That's how we win. And now, he paused, letting the words settle in the quiet morning air. Now we're free to live, not just survive. Elena looked out at the city below, a soft warmth spreading through her chest. The skyline shimmered in golden light, reflecting endless possibilities. Free, she repeated, for the first time in a long time. Yes, Luca said, and nothing they do, nothing they whisper, and nothing they try will change that. The city may never fully understand, but we do. That word that started it all. He glanced down briefly, then back at her. It isn't just a memory anymore. It's our history, our power, our bond. Elena tilted her head up toward him, eyes glistening slightly. A bond, sealed by one sentence. Luca leaned down, brushing his lips against her temple. A sentence that lasted forever, he said softly. And will, always. They stood in silence then, together, watching the city awaken. The war was over. The threats had been neutralized. Betrayal had been punished. And the lesson of that night, the lesson of power, respect, and loyalty, would remain with them forever. The sun rose higher, casting its light across glass towers and streets below, but it also illuminated something else. A story of love forged in danger, respect earned through courage, and a connection stronger than fear, violence, or betrayal. Elena and Luca had faced the world together. They had survived its worst. And in the quiet after the storm, they understood a truth few ever learn. Some bonds cannot be broken. Some sentences are permanent. And some people are forever. Hand in hand, side by side, they turned away from the balcony. The city could talk, speculate, and wonder. But they already knew the truth. They had each other. They had their legacy. And nothing, not threat, betrayal, or fear, would ever change that. As they walked back into the estate, shadows of the past fading behind them, Luca whispered softly to Elena, almost as if the words were just for her. One word, one sentence, one life, and we changed everything. Elena smiled, resting her head lightly on his shoulder. Forever, she said. Forever, Luca agreed. And outside, the city continued to live, unaware that the night a single sentence silenced the world had also rewritten history.